Welcome to Heartbreak Chronicles. Marcus Reed stood outside the opulent ballroom, his fingers brushing over his daughter's engagement invitation in the inside pocket of his suit. The foiled lettering on it shimmers in the light. Sophia Reed and Daniel Harrington cordially invite you to. 7 years since Emma left him, taking their daughter with her, into the arms of that pretentious business tycoon, Blake Reynolds. 7 years of loneliness, 7 years of pain, 7 years of rebuilding myself. He took a deep breath and walked towards the entrance of the ballroom. The security officer stopped him, checking the list with a subtle look. "Papers, sir." Marcus calmly produces his driver's license and endures the skeptical stares of security. Eventually, he was allowed in. Under the crystal chandelier, socialites are dressed and mingling. Marcus feels out of place, his plain suit contrasting with the lavish gowns around him. He took the champagne handed to him by the waiter and looked around for Sophia. "Marcus." A gentle voice came from behind. He turned and saw a young lady smiling. "I'm Rachel, Sophia's college roommate. She talks about you a lot. All bad things, I guess." Marcus asked half-jokingly, but the concern implicit in the question was obvious. Rachel shook her head. "On the contrary, she always said you taught her to think independently and how to know right from wrong." She paused. "She's glad you're here, though she's nervous. Worried about how Blake will react." "How's Blake?" Marcus couldn't help but ask. "He maintains the appearance of perfection, but in private." Rachel chose her words carefully. "There are rumors that he wasn't always so kind to Emma." Before Marcus is able to inquire further, the crowd parts and he sees Sophia. Her beauty took his breath away. She had her mother's grace but carried his fortitude. She is talking to a young man, presumably her fiancé Daniel. As if sensing her father's gaze, Sophia looked up and their eyes met. Marcus saw the flash of surprise in her eyes, followed by he wasn't sure was it a hint of relief? She politely apologized to Daniel and walked towards Marcus. "Dad," she stopped a few steps away, "you're really here. You invited me." Marcus answered simply. "I didn't think you'd come after." Her words faded. "After everything?" Marcus picked up on her words gently. "I would do anything for you, Sophia. Always." The words hung in the air between them, carrying 7 years of longing and separation. Sophia hesitates for a moment, then steps forward and gives him a slightly rusty hug. Marcus sensed her nervousness, but still hugged his daughter tightly, trying not to let the emotions spill over. "Come meet Daniel," she said as she stepped back. "He'd love to meet you." As they turned around, Marcus realized that Blake Reynolds was coming from the other end of the room, with Emma reluctantly following him. A hint of displeasure surfaced on Blake's handsome face, his gray hair and perfectly tailored suit exuding power and wealth. "Sophia," Blake's booming voice interrupted them. "The Hendersons want to congratulate you. Why don't you go meet them?" His tone was undeniable, his body standing between Marcus and Sophia, his back to his stepdaughter. "Webb," Blake turned to Marcus, his voice icy. "I don't remember seeing your name on the invite list." "It's right there," Marcus said calmly, "right under father of daughters." "A technical oversight that I should have taken care of long ago," Blake smiled, but there was no warmth in his eyes. "It's a celebration of family and friends. I fit both criteria." Marcus maintains eye contact. Emma finally spoke, her voice tight. "Marcus, please don't make a scene. It's Sophia's big day." "No one's making a scene, Emma." Marcus didn't look away from staring at Blake. "I'm just here to congratulate my daughter on her engagement. That's all." Marcus noticed that the guests around him were pretending not to be listening, but were actually paying close attention to the scene. Sophia freezes in place as Daniel walks up to her, looking increasingly uncomfortable. Blake moved closer to Marcus and lowered his voice. "Let me be clear. You're nothing here, a footnote, a pathetic loser that Emma was smart enough to leave." He took it a step further, almost gritting his teeth. "Go back to your pathetic little life and never show your face again. Sophia has a real father figure. She has me." Everyone in the room held their breath, waiting for Marcus to explode. But surprisingly, his expression didn't change, and his silence seemed to unsettle Blake even more. "There's nothing to tell, is there, Webb?" Blake said smugly. "No surprise. You never could stand up for yourself, could you? That's why Emma left you, and why Sophia chose to follow us." Marcus' gaze shifted to Emma, who couldn't look him in the eye. Then he looked over at Sophia. "Who?" with horror written all over her face, took a step toward them. "Dad." She opened her mouth, but Blake raised his hand to stop her, not even looking back at her. "Stand still, Sophia," he ordered. "Your mother and I will handle this." Blake turned back to Marcus. "Now, as I was saying, Dash." Marcus interrupted. "I want to talk to my daughter." "No way." Blake stepped directly in front of Marcus. "You're nothing to her anymore, punk. She doesn't want to see you." He burst out laughing, clearly enjoying the power play. Emma stood back and grabbed Blake's arm to try to dissuade him, but it was too late. Daniel walks over to Sophia, his expression grim as he witnesses Blake's behavior. Marcus didn't raise his voice, didn't clench his fists, and his complete lack of reaction seemed to unsettle Blake more than any outburst. "I see," Marcus said finally. He pulled his cell phone out of his pocket, dialed a number, and walked away a few steps. "It's me," he said softly, enforcing the secession agreement in full force. "Yes, immediate execution." He put away his cell phone and walked straight to the exit without looking back, ignoring the whispers behind him. Emma caught up with him and stopped him in the foyer. "Marcus, wait," her voice quivered. "That's too much. Blake just gets overprotective sometimes." "Does he protect you in the same way?" Marcus asked, noting her almost imperceptible wince. "What does that mean?" "You know exactly what it means." He scrutinized her face. "Was it worth it, Emma? Give up 20 years of marriage for this gilded cage?" "I'm happy," she insisted, but the words sounded hollow. "If you say so." Marcus turns to leave. "What was that call about?" Anxiety seeped into her voice. Marcus stopped in the doorway, just catching up with an old friend. An hour later, a commotion erupted in the ballroom. Daniel's father, Edward Harrington, CEO of Harrington Technologies, is having a tense, white-faced phone conversation. He eagerly greeted his son as he went over to him, and their intense whispering grew louder and louder until Edward's voice carried throughout the room. "This can't be true. That guy's just a security consultant from Boston." Daniel's reply was inaudible, but his expression changed from confusion to disbelief. Blake walks towards them, champagne in hand, oblivious to the tension. "Edward, just the man I wanted to see about the investment opportunity we discussed, Dash." Edward stared at Blake as if seeing him for the first time. "Stay away from my son and my company." He turned to Daniel. "We're leaving now." The entire room falls silent as Daniel walks woodenly back to Sophia, his expression becoming inscrutable. "Daniel," Sophia reached for his hand. "What's wrong?" "Who the hell is your father, Sophia?" Daniel asked, his voice tight. "Who is he really?" "He's Marcus Reed." "You know," confusion filled her eyes. "A security consultant." "No." Daniel shook his head. "He's not in that capacity." He took the engagement ring out of his pocket and placed it on the table between them. "I can't do that. You never told me who your father really was." He turns away and follows Edward toward the exit. Sophia stood frozen in place, the discarded ring glinting in the hanging light. She turned to Blake and Emma, her voice breaking. "What's he talking about? What have you done?" Blake's face lost its blood. "Your father is obviously spreading lies and destroying your happiness." "What lies?" Sophia questioned. What could make Daniel leave like that? Blake had no answer, and for the first time, uncertainty flashed in his eyes. In the parking lot, Marcus sits in his car and watches the Harringtons leave through the rearview mirror. His cell phone received a text message. Phase 1 complete. Target background information communicated to Harrington executives, awaiting further instructions. Marcus started the engine, and that familiar sense of calm returned within him, that state of transcendence that had once made him so efficient, so intimidating. "Now we begin," he said to the empty car, pulling away from the ruins of his daughter's engagement party. 3 days after the disastrous end of his engagement party, Marcus sits in a nondescript restaurant in the suburbs. The leather card holder creaks as Lucas Mitchell slides in, one of the few old friends Marcus still keeps in touch with. "Jesus, James," Lucas whispered, using Marcus' original name. "When you said you might need contingencies, I didn't think you'd blow up your daughter's engagement party." "I didn't mean to," Marcus admitted, stirring his coffee, but Blake crossed the line. "So you revealed yourself to Edward Harrington? Do you realize how much you're risking?" Lucas leaned in close. "You've been Marcus Reed for 15 years. There's a reason your old identity was buried." Marcus' expression remained calm. Edward needs to know what kind of family his son is marrying into. I just asked Dimitri to tell him about. About what? Before I was Marcus Reed, security consultant and family man. I was James Morrison, specializing in untraceable corporate dismantling and reputation destruction for clients who could afford my services. I am directly responsible for the downfall of at least 7 Fortune 500 CEOs. God. Lucas breathed backwards. You told him everything? More than enough. Edward himself has skeletons in the closet. To protect Michael from the consequences, he will remain silent. Marcus sipped his coffee. Besides, Blake forced my hand. What about Sophia? Something flashed in Marcus's eyes and a momentary crack appeared in his calm facade. She'll understand eventually. She'll hate you for ruining her engagement. She chose Emma and Blake over me years ago. I have nothing left to lose. Marcus has a couple of photos on his desk. Blake Reynolds has built his empire on top of the table image, financial, social, personal. I intend to systematically dismantle each one. Lucas checks out photos of Blake with various business partners, architectural plans, and financial documents. It's pretty extensive surveillance. I've been watching him for 7 years, gathering information and understanding his weaknesses. Why act now? Marcus' jaw tensed. I want Sophia to have a chance at happiness, even if it means accepting Blake in her life. I keep my distance and play the role of the defeated ex-husband. But when Blake humiliated me in front of her, he sent a message that I was worthless and that my presence hurt Sophia. He paused. It's time to send a message of my own. Lucas studied his friend. It's not just about Blake anymore, is it? And Emma. Emma made her choice, Marcus said coldly. She wanted his money, his status. She can experience the breakdown together with him by her side. What about your old vows? The promise of you leaving that life? That oath was to protect my family. Marcus' voice hardened. I don't have a family anymore. The bell on the dining room door rang, and a young lady walked in. Sophia. She spotted her father immediately and approached, her face a mask of controlled anger. Coming through, she said to Lucas, who nodded and left the card table. How did you find me? Marcus asked as she sat down. I remember you liked this place. Sophia's hands shook slightly. What did you do? Daniel won't return my calls, and his father hired security guards to prevent me from approaching him. Marcus calmly locked eyes with her. I made a phone call. To whom? What was said? When Marcus didn't answer immediately, she continued. Do you hate me that much? Is this my punishment for staying with my mom after the divorce? I never hated you, Sophia, not for a moment. Then why ruin my engagement? Marcus carefully considered his next words. Sometimes the truth itself is destructive. What truth? That's something no one told me. Her voice rose, drawing the eyes of the other customers. Ask your mother. Marcus' tone remained calm. Ask her who I was before she met me. Ask her what she really knows about me. I'm asking you. I'm not ready to tell you yet. Sophia's eyes filled with angry tears. 7 years of barely talking to me, and now you've ruined the most important relationship in my life. Was it worth it, Dad? That word dad shook him more than Marcus had expected. You'll understand someday. I totally get it now. She snapped to her feet. Stay away from us, everyone. Marcus watched her leave, her parting words echoing words he had heard from countless targets he had systematically destroyed. That familiar emptiness enveloped him, that void where emotions should be present but weren't. His cell phone vibrated, and he received a message from Dimitri. Phase 2 is ready for your green light. Marcus replied, Start. Reynolds Realty's headquarters occupies the top 10 floors of a downtown skyscraper, its logo branded in gold on the glass facade. In the executive suite, Blake Reynolds paces in front of the floor-to-ceiling windows, the phone close to his ear. What do you mean divestment? Harrington's only committed to that investment last month. His face contorted with anger. Well, call Edward and fix this. He slammed the phone across the room, nearly hitting the assistant who had just come in with a stack of papers. Trouble again? A voice came from the doorway. Philip Carter, Blake's business partner and childhood friend, leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. Edward Harrington pulls out of Riverside Heights development, $40 million gone. Blake slumped in his chair. First his son breaks off his engagement to Sophia, and now this. Something's not right. Maybe it has something to do with the calls I've been getting, Philip says carefully. 3 investors have asked for urgent audits this week alone. Blake's head snapped up. Who? Martinson Group, Apex Capital, and Hamilton Trust. No way, they can't just ask Dash. Actually, they can. The relevant terms are written in the contract. Philip walked towards the desk. Blake, what the hell is going on? These are institutional investors who have been with us for years, and all of a sudden they are panicking. It's market angst, that's all. Blake loosened his tie. Yes. Philip placed a folder on the table. These arrived this morning, sent anonymously to my private address. Blake opened the folder and froze. Inside were bank statements showing large transfers of funds to offshore accounts, transfers authorized by his signature. What the fuck is this? He questioned. You're telling me? Philip's voice cooled. Because they look an awful lot like records of you embezzling company funds. These are forgeries. Blake stood up, his face reddening. Someone is setting me up. Who is it? Blake started pacing again, his mind racing. Reed. Marcus Reed. Philip raised an eyebrow. Emma's ex-husband? The one you humiliated at Sophia's engagement party. He's more than that. He is. I don't know what he is, but the Harringtons seem to know Dash. Blake, Philip said slowly, what did you do? Before Blake could answer, his assistant interrupted. Sir, Mrs. Reynolds is here to see you. Emma strides in, designer handbag clutched like a shield. Our cards were declined at Bergdorf's. She gets right to the point. All of them. The salesman said, our account has been frozen. Blake and Philip exchanged glances. It was a bank error, Blake assured fluidly. Like those investment properties that are suddenly insolvent. Emma's voice rises. Like the calls I get from friends saying they've heard rumors of financial irregularities? Did anyone call you? Blake questioned. Oh, Barbara Montgomery said her husband withdrew from your fund yesterday. Whiters canceled our dinner plans on some ridiculous pretext. Cracks appeared in Emma's perfect composure. What the hell happened, Blake? Philip cleared his throat. I thought I'd give you two some privacy. After he leaves, Emma confronts her husband. Is this because of what you did to Marcus at the party? Don't be ridiculous, Blake dismissed with a wave of his hand. Reed is a nobody, a loser who can't even keep his wife. Then explain what's happening now. Blake avoided her eyes. Temporary cash flow problem, nothing serious. Liar. Emma's voice was flat. You've been lying about our finances, haven't you? Those late-night phone calls, mysterious meetings. You don't seem to mind the benefits it brings. Blake snapped. Jewelry, vacations, status. You're happy to enjoy it all and never ask questions. This accusation is like a slap in the face. Emma took a step back, her expression hardening. Fix this, Blake, whatever it takes. After she leaves, Blake unlocks his personal safe and removes a prepaid cell phone. He dialed a number from memory. Baker Security, a gruff voice answered. This is Reynolds. I need all the information I can find on Marcus Reed. Standard rates. Money is no object. I want to know who he really is. Across town, in a generic apartment rented under an alias, Marcus listens in on the bug he planted in Blake's office months ago. He smiled thinly when he heard the flustered conversation that had just taken place. His phone rings. Tara Lee, Sophia's friend, who has unwittingly become a key part of his plan. Mr. Reed, it's Tara. I got your message about worrying about Sophia. Thanks for calling back, Tara. Did she tell you what happened at the engagement party? Something about. Tara sounded hesitant. She was in pain and confused. Did she mention that Blake stopped me from talking to her and humiliated me in front of everyone? No, but that sounds like his MO. He always controls who has access to Sophia and Mrs. Reynolds. Marcus feigned concern. I'm worried about both of them. Blake has a temper, doesn't he? There was a pause. How did you know? Just a hunch. Marcus carefully steered the conversation. Tara, you work for one of Blake's companies, right? Yes, in the marketing department at Reynolds Development. Have you noticed anything unusual? Any sign of financial problems? Tara lowered her voice. As a matter of fact, there is. There were rumors of impending payroll problems, and some executives left suddenly. She hesitated. Why do you ask? Just connecting the dots, Marcus replied casually. Tara, would you be willing to pay more attention for Sophia's sake? I'm worried that Blake might drag her and Emma into a bad situation. Of course, Tara agreed immediately. Sophia is my best friend. After hanging up, Marcus opens his laptop to check on the progress of other aspects of his operation. Dmitry had succeeded in planting doubt among key investors. Philip had received forged financial documents. documents that were close enough to the truth to be compelling. And, most importantly, real evidence of Blake's questionable business practices, which evidence that Marcus had been gathering for years, was being anonymously delivered to the appropriate regulatory agencies. Marcus's cell phone vibrates with a text message from Lucas. Blake hired Baker Security to investigate you. Schedule, Marcus replied. 48 hours until they find out what I want them to find out. The pieces are in place, and the first domino has fallen. Soon enough, Blake Reynolds will realize what it means to wake up a sleeping James Morrison. Philip Carter has never considered himself a particularly moral person. In business, especially real estate development, certain ethical corners are often routinely cut. But as he reviewed documents in his home office at 2 a.m., a cold feeling of dread sank into his stomach. Anonymous documents detail systemic fraud in Reynolds' real estate portfolio, inflated valuations, double-entry assets, fake investors. If even half of that is true, they are facing not temporary cash flow problems, but criminal charges. His phone rang, a number he didn't recognize. Mr. Carter. The voice was low, with a slight Eastern European accent. I believe we have mutual interests to discuss. Philip sat up straight. Who are you? Someone who knows what Blake Reynolds is hiding from you. Someone who can offer you protection when it all falls apart. Is this some kind of blackmail? A soft laugh came from the other end of the line. On the contrary, it's a lifeline. Blake has been systematically looting your company for years. The evidence is already in the hands of the Securities and Exchange Commission, and you have about 48 hours before the investigation becomes public. Philip's mouth grew dry. What do you want? Publicly clear the air with Blake, immediately. Claiming ignorance of his behavior, which is based on your reaction to the documents I sent, is largely true. How did you know about those papers? Philip demanded, then realized, you sent them. Smart people, unlike your partners. Why did you do that? A pause. Blake took something away from someone I respect. It's just a restoration of the balance of the universe. The phone is disconnected. Philip sat motionless for a few minutes, then began making phone calls, first to his personal attorney and then to a crisis management firm. By dawn, he had a framework plan to save whatever he could preserve from the impending ruin. At the Reynolds mansion, Blake wakes up to find the bed empty. He found Emma in the kitchen, still in her robe, gazing at her tablet. You should see this, she said, not looking up, her voice hollow. Blake reached for his tablet, and on the screen was a financial news site with the headline, Reynolds Properties Under Scrutiny. Co-founder Carter distances himself from worrisome practices. What the hell? Blake grabbed his cell phone and dialed Philip's number, who didn't answer. That backstabbing bastard. Is it true? Emma asked softly. Are we in trouble? Before Blake could answer, his phone rang. Mr. Reynolds, we have preliminary information on Reed, the investigator reported. And the situation is unusual. What did you find out? Nothing. Literally nothing. 15 years ago, Marcus Reed appeared out of thin air with perfect documentation, but no history. It's the kind of identity created by the Witness Protection Program, or the investigator hesitated. Or what? Or someone with very specialized skills and connections. The man's voice lowered. There are rumors in certain circles about an agent known as the architect who disappeared around the point in time that Reed appeared. He is known for constructing and executing the systematic dismantling of individuals deemed untouchable. Blake's blood curdled. You mean Reed is this architect? I'd say it's a possibility you should consider. My advice is that whatever you've done to piss this guy off, revoke it immediately. Blake hung up the phone and slumped in his chair, his thoughts racing. Is it really possible that Reed is some sort of professional destroyer? It seemed absurd. The quiet, defeated man he'd humiliated at the engagement party didn't fit that image. However, the timing was incredibly coincidental. It all started to fall apart that night, after Reed's mysterious phone call. Blake, Emma's voice interrupted his thoughts. I asked if we were in trouble. He looked at his wife, still beautiful, but showing signs of recent stress. The woman who left her husband of 20 years for a richer, more powerful man. We'll be fine, he lied. I need to make some calls. He retired to his study, locked the door, and then accessed his own set of offshore accounts that even Philip didn't know about. The balance is healthy enough to disappear and start over somewhere without an extradition treaty. Blake kept the retreat going. He just didn't think he'd need it because of Emma's ex-husband. His computer screen suddenly went black and then displayed a message. Remember the people you call losers? He remembers you. Blake stared at the words, a chill spreading along his spine. He reached for the panic button under his desk, the one connected to his security team. Nothing happened. No reaction. His phone vibrated, and he received a text message from an unknown number. They can't help you. Blake rushes to the window and pulls back the curtains. The security guards that usually patrol around the property are gone. He's alone in the house, with Emma, fully exposed, and for the first time in decades, Blake Reynolds feels real fear. Across town, Marcus sits in a rented apartment with Lucas and Dimitri, watching the Reynolds mansion through the surveillance feed. Even through the camera, Blake's panic was obvious. Phase 2 complete, Dimitri noted with professional satisfaction. His business reputation is in free fall. Philip Carter has been completely disassociated from him, and the Securities and Exchange Commission's investigation officially launches tomorrow. What about personal accounts? Marcus asked. It has been flagged at multiple agencies, Lucas confirmed, and he is unable to access his retreat funds. We've effectively trapped him. Marcus nodded. Begin Phase 3. Are you sure? Lucas looks worried that Stage 3 will directly affect Emma and Sophia. They chose him, Marcus said coldly, that they might share his fate. James, Dimitri said cautiously, using Marcus' original name. You have accomplished your goal. Blake is ruined. Is the rest necessary? Marcus' expression remained unperturbed. Blake didn't just steal my wife. He poisoned my daughter against me and made me a stranger in her life. It's not just about punishment. It's about the truth. They all need to see Blake for what he is, and me for what I am. He stood up and walked over to the window, overlooking the city below. Most importantly, they need to understand that betrayal has consequences, and that consequences can't be erased with apologies or remorse. Lucas and Dimitri exchanged glances, but said nothing. They had known James Morrison long enough to know when he had made up his mind. The man who once brought corporate giants to their knees without showing his face has fully awakened, and Blake Reynolds has become his personal target. The Metropolitan Museum of Art's benefit dinner has been a key event on the city's social calendar for months. Despite rumors swirling about the financial woes of the Reynolds estate, Blake and Emma arrived in their usual style, he in a tailored tuxedo and she in a pricey couture gown. Smile. Blake hissed through a tight smile as he posed for a photo. Everything's fine. Emma obeyed, though traces of tension were evident in the corners of her eyes. The past week has been a nightmare of frozen accounts, canceled credit cards, and increasingly urgent calls from Blake. Their perfect life is disintegrating, and she still doesn't understand why. The reception inside is cold and unusual, and former friends suddenly make excuses to leave as the Reynoldses approach. The conversation stopped as they passed, Carter greeting them with exaggerated politeness as cameras flashed nearby. Glad you could make it, Philip greeted. You betraying parasite, Blake growled, keeping his smile on. We built that company together, only for one of you to apparently decide to dismantle it on your own. Philip sips his champagne. The SEC investigators had a lot of questions about those offshore transfers. Fortunately, I know nothing about it. Those records are fake, and you know it. Yes. Philip's eyes turned cold, cause they coincided with some discrepancies I'd noticed over the years but chose to ignore. My mistake. Before Blake could respond, Philip turned to Emma. I'm sorry you got caught up in this, Emma. I know how important social status is to you. This sarcasm is delivered with perfect politeness, and as Philip leaves, Emma grabs Blake's arm in agony. What is he talking about? What offshore transfer? Not here, Blake muttered, guiding her toward the bar. As the evening progresses, Blake grows increasingly desperate. Key business relationships disintegrate before his eyes, and past allies openly align themselves with Philip. The whispers have morphed into a public discussion about the impending collapse of Reynolds Realty. His last hope was Hamilton Woodward, whose investment firm controlled enough capital to possibly stabilize the situation. Hamilton. Blake approached the silver-haired financier in a forced, cheerful tone. Just the man I wanted to see. Woodward looked at him coldly. Blake, I was actually hoping to avoid this conversation. I understand there are worrisome rumors. Blake began his prepared speech. But I can assure you, Save your breath, interrupted Woodward. I received some very interesting papers yesterday. It's actually a recording. Blake hesitated, Recording. You discuss how you play investors like me, how we are stupid old men, easily manipulated by your projected confidence, and how you have misrepresented assets over the years. Woodward's expression was glacial. Particularly illuminating was your joke about my daughter, the one you tried to seduce at my holiday party last year. Blake's face turned pale. Hamilton, I never dash. My company has officially severed all ties with Reynolds Realty, effective immediately. Woodward turns to leave, then stops. One more thing. The person who provided these recordings suggested I ask you about the loser you humiliated. I think you know who he is. As Woodward walks away, Blake frantically scans the crowded room. Is Reed here? Watching his destruction unfold, the sound system suddenly rattled, and the soft background music was replaced by a familiar voice, Blake's, right in the middle of a conversation. Of course, those properties are overrated. These investment dinosaurs don't know the difference. When they find out, we'll have their money and they'll have a pile of scrap paper. The room falls silent as the recording continues to play, revealing Blake's disdain for investors, partners, and even the charitable organizations they claim to support. Blake rushed to a nearby attendant. Who's controlling the sound system? Turn it off. But the damage is done. Hundreds of influential people stared at him with expressions ranging from shock to contempt. Emma disappeared from him. He found her in the check room, her hands trembling as she gathered her things. Emma, wait. Is that true? She demanded. Those recordings? Of course not. Lies spring up automatically. Don't. Her voice tightened with anger. Don't lie to me now, not after you've already ruined everything. I ruined everything? Blake growled, grabbing her arm. I built everything. Everything you've enjoyed for the last 7 years, the house, the vacations, the position you so longed for, everything you left your husband for. Emma breaks away. I left Marcus because you promised me a safe, better life, and you delivered, until Reed decided to ruin it all. Marcus. Emma looks stunned. Your pathetic ex-husband isn't who you think he is. Blake's voice drops to a harsh whisper. The man you left, the man I humiliated. He's systematically destroying us with skills and connections neither of us knew he possessed. For the first time, real fear showed in Emma's eyes. What have you done, Blake? What did you do to provoke him? Outside the museum, Marcus observes the Reynolds' altercation through binoculars from a parked car. At his side, Dimitri monitors an audio feed from Emma's handbag, implanted a few weeks ago by Tara, who believes she's helping Sophia by tracking Blake's irritable behavior. She finally saw him clearly, Dimitri observed. Too late, Marcus replied emotionlessly. The Securities and Exchange Commission acts tomorrow. By morning their assets will be frozen. His phone rings. It's Sophia's number. He answered on the speaker. Is it true? Her voice was rough. Are you the one destroying Blake's business, his reputation? Who told you that? Mom just called, hysterical. That you've been plotting revenge for years, that you're not who I thought you were. Marcus carefully considered the wording. Your mother made her choice, Sophia. Blake made a choice. Now they face the consequences. So it was indeed you, she sounded shocked. The business problems, the social humiliation, the fact that Michael broke off our engagement, all because Blake insulted you at the party? It was never about insults, Marcus' voice hardened. It was about what they took from me, from us. What are you talking about? Ask your mother about James Morrison. Ask her what she knew when she married me and when she left me. The line was silent for a few seconds. Who's James Morrison? Me. Marcus ends the call and turns to Dimitri. She will now search for information. Make sure she finds exactly what we want her to find. As they pull away from the museum, Marcus's expression stays cold, but something inside touches him, not remorse, but the realization that some bridges, once burned, can never be rebuilt, even with his only daughter. 3 days after the dinner disaster, Blake sits in his home office surrounded by empty wine bottles. News of the collapse of the Reynolds estate is playing on TV. Federal agents have raided their offices, Philip Carter has become a tainted witness, and investors are filing lawsuits. Everything he had built up over decades went up in smoke in a week. The security system beeps to announce a visitor. Blake checks the camera and sees Emma's ex-husband standing at the front door, alone and seemingly unarmed. Blake let him in, already too frustrated to even feel anger. Marcus walked into the office, his presence filling the room despite his casual attire. He examined the messy space and the disheveled man in front of him with the clinical clarity of a scientist observing a failed experiment. Read. Blake tried to steel himself. Or should I call you Morrison? Either one will do. Marcus kept standing, though officially only one of them exists. What do you want? Come to admire your masterpiece. Just here to send a message. It's not over. Blake laughed, bitter and hollow. What else is there to take? My company was destroyed, my reputation ruined, my assets frozen. You still have your freedom, for now. The implied threat hangs in the air. Blake reaches for his drink. How did you do that? All of this. Methodically, Marcus' tone was as casual as an idle conversation. I installed listening devices in your home and office 3 years ago, gained access to your financial records, cultivated relationships with your associates to identify weaknesses. Why did you wait so long to use it? I would have been content to observe and let you self-destruct naturally. Marcus' expression hardened. Until you decided to humiliate me in front of my daughter, until you prevented me from speaking to her at her own engagement party. All this because I hurt your feelings. Blake scoffed. No, all because you're exactly what I know you are, an arrogant liar who stole my family and thought there would be no consequences. The downstairs front door opened and closed, the sound of heels tapping on marble coming from Emma as she called out, Blake? She appeared in the doorway and stiffened at the sight of Marcus. What are you doing here? Hello, Emma. Marcus' voice softened imperceptibly. You look good considering the circumstances. Emma walked into the room, her designer attire contrasting with her tired face. Are you here to finish destroying what's left of our lives? It's up to Blake. Marcus turned to him. The SEC has evidence of your financial crimes, and the FBI has recordings of you discussing bribing government officials. You faced decades in federal prison. Blake went even paler. What do you want? A full confession, every illegal act, every person you've harmed, to be delivered to the authorities tomorrow. You're crazy, Blake scoffed. Why would I do that? Because I'm giving you a choice. Confess and get a reduced sentence, or resist and watch as more evidence surfaces implicating Emma as a knowing accomplice. Emma sucked in a backwards breath. You won't. Marcus turned to her with an unreadable expression. Wouldn't I? You threw away our 20-year marriage for this man, and you helped turn Sophia against me. Why should I protect you? Because you loved me once, Emma whispered. Love. Marcus repeats the word as if it were foreign. When you start plotting your exit months before you leave, when you move money to a private account, do you consider love? Blake looked sharply at Emma. What private account? She opened the account 6 months before she left you, Marcus informed him. And she systematically prepared for leaving you for over a year, looking for ways to maximize her position for the divorce. Emma shook her head frantically. That's not Dash. Don't bother denying it. Marcus interrupted her. I've got bank records, records of lawyer consultations, everything. You're not Blake's victim, Emma. You're his willing accomplice. In fact, you were the one who approached him first. Blake stared at Emma with an expression of gradual understanding. You told me you were unhappily married, that Marcus was controlling and possibly dangerous. She needed a reason, Marcus explained calmly. A narrative that made her a victim rather than a betrayer. Is this true? Blake questioned. Emma's silence was answer enough. Marcus continued. I'm not here to fix your broken relationship. I'm here to convey the terms. Blake confesses everything tomorrow and doesn't implicate Emma, or I make sure you two face the harshest possible consequences. Why are you protecting her? Blake asked. I'm not protecting Emma. I'm protecting Sophia from seeing both her parents destroyed. Marcus looked at his watch. You have until noon tomorrow to decide. As he turned to leave, Emma followed him into the hallway. Marcus, wait, please. He stopped but didn't turn around. I made a terrible mistake, she said, her voice breaking. I see that now. Blake isn't what I thought he was. Neither am I, apparently, Marcus replied coldly. It's not too late for us. Emma grabbed his arm. I still care about you. Marcus finally turned, his eyes revealing nothing. 7 years ago, I would have given anything to hear those words. I'll forgive everything. Now what? Hope flickered in her eyes. Now I see you clearly. You're not coming back to me because you love me. You're running away from the consequences of your choices. He gently removed her hand. There's nothing between us anymore, Emma. Never again. He left, leaving her standing alone in the hallway of the mansion that would soon no longer be hers. Outside, Marcus sat in his car, allowing himself a moment of calm reflection. His cell phone vibrated, and he received a message from Sophia. "I now know who James Morrison is. We need to talk." The small waterfront park was empty in the early morning light. Marcus sat on a bench overlooking the harbor, watching the sailboats gently rock in their berths. This used to be Sophia's favorite place as a child, and he taught her to hit the water and identify different birds. He sensed her presence before he saw her. She sat next to him, keeping a discreet distance. "Did he confess?" she asked, opening the door. "Yes, to federal authorities this morning. He could serve 5 to 7 years. Marcus' gaze lingered on the water. "Your mother was excluded from the charges." "You did?" "Yes." Sophia exhaled slowly. "I've been studying James Morrison all night. Not much can be found, but what exists is frightening. It was a different life, and you were a professional destroyer." There was a mixture of disbelief and awe in her voice. "They call you the architect because you design customized destruction for the enemies of powerful characters." Marcus nodded. "A specialized skill set. You disappeared 15 years ago, just before you met Mom. I want to quit and live a normal life, a family life." Marcus finally looked at her. "I buried James as thoroughly as I could and became Marcus Reed with the help of some people who owed me favors. Does Mom know who you really are?" "Not at first. I told her it was after we were married, when she was pregnant with you. She accepts it, or seems to." Sophia processes the information. "When she left you, she used that knowledge as leverage, suggesting that if you fought too hard for custody, she might reveal your past." Marcus' jaw tightened. "She knows exactly how to make sure I'll back off. So you let us go?" "I let you two go, protected you from my past, and then watched Blake systematically turn you against me." Sophia stared at her hands. "I believed him, believed Mom, when they said you were unstable and could be dangerous. They're not entirely wrong, but you're not what they describe either." She looked up, tears glistening in her eyes. "They took my father, and now you've taken my mother's husband, my fiancé. Michael left on his own, once he learned the truth." "Because you made sure he learned the truth," Sophia's voice rose. "Was that necessary? Destroy my relationship?" Marcus met her gaze calmly. "Michael has a right to know who his future father-in-law really is. The choice to leave was his own. So what now? Now you've destroyed everything. Blake pays for his crimes, your mother starts over, and you," Marcus hesitated, "live your own life, away from their manipulation. What about us? Can we repair what's been destroyed?" The question hung between them, loaded with 7 years of estrangement. Marcus carefully considered his response. "I'll always be your father, Sophia. That never changes." He paused. "But trust is not easily rebuilt once it is broken. You choose to believe the worst about me, no doubt. You accepted their narrative because it was convenient that way." "I was 18, she protested, confused and hurt. "And in the 7 years since?" Marcus' voice stays calm but firm. "Missed calls, return mail. And you made a choice." Tears streamed down Sophia's cheeks. "So no forgiveness, no second chances?" "It's not about forgiveness, it's about awareness." Marcus stood up and looked out over the harbor. "Some hurts can't be undone. Some betrayals leave a permanent mark." "What about Michael? Can you talk to him and explain?" Marcus shook his head. "That's not my responsibility. If he really loves you, knowing who your father is won't change that. So I lose everything because of who you are?" "No." Marcus' voice hardened slightly. "You lose something because of who I am. You're facing consequences from your mother's choices, Blake's choices, and yes, yours." He turned to leave, then stopped. "For what it's worth, I never stopped loving you, Sophia, even when you stopped believing in me." Marcus walks away, his pace steady and deliberate. Behind him, Sophia remained on the bench, her face buried in her hands. The final phase of his plan has been completed. Blake will serve her time. Emma will rebuild from scratch without the wealth and status she betrayed her family to gain. Sophia will find her own path, and perhaps a wiser understanding of human nature. And Marcus Reed, or James Morrison, depending on who's asking, will continue his solitary existence, neither hiding nor flaunting his true nature. As he pulls away from the waterfront, his phone rings, and it's Lucas' number. "Done," Marcus replied without preamble. "Are you satisfied?" "What about you?" Lucas asked. Marcus considers this. Satisfaction means he's always looking for emotional resolution. But what he performs isn't about feelings. It's about justice. Cold, precise justice. Justice is served, he finally replied. What about your daughter? Is there a settlement? No. Marcus' tone was final. Some bridges can't be rebuilt. What will you do next? Marcus glanced at the address of the safe house Dimitri had sent him, a place to hide during the frenzy of media frenzy over Blake's confession. Go on, he said simply, just go on. The sun rises higher over the city horizon as Marcus sails into his uncertain future. Behind him were the ruins of those who had betrayed him, not destroyed in a fit of vengeful rage, but dismantled with the precise, methodical skill that had once made James Morrison a legend. The man they call a loser, the man they despise and humiliate, has shown them exactly who he is and who he has always been. That's the end of today's story. For more captivating tales, hit subscribe and never miss an episode.